While most Western European countries have always been a bit more comfortable with high income tax rates than where I'm from in the United States, and many European countries, all but about three of them in fact, have gotten rid of their failed wealth taxes on high net worth individuals, there is one upcoming tax that Europeans currently don't have that I believe will be coming to affect wealthy Europeans in the years to come. I'm going to tell you what it is, why I think it will affect you, and how to prepare. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. Here at Nomad Capitalist, we take my experience of over a dozen years in the field all around the world, building a network of experts and a team of almost 30 people here at Nomad Capitalist to help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs go where they're treated best. You can learn more about us at nomadcapitalist.com. And today I want to talk about something that I think many European citizens should be concerned about. I've worked with a number of European citizens over the years from the Netherlands, from Germany, from Spain, Portugal, all over Europe really. And one thing that I hear is that this will never happen in our country. But I believe that this tax is increasingly possible as there is a greater and greater skepticism and frustration with wealth in the West in general. And I think you've seen that during this pandemic, where governments have now taken a very enviable position from their perspective, that you have to listen to them and they're in control and they're going to take greater control for the greater good. And they're going to dictate what that is and they're going to go back and forth at times. But they don't owe you anything. And we've seen people stranded all around the world, people who went on their honeymoon, on a vacation, people who work in other countries, people who got stuck. I've always talked about how the United States, people think that they're going to be airlifted out of a war zone or out of a disaster zone. Meanwhile, in China, the embassy said, I don't know, we got a plane. If you want to pay us, come on over. And other countries decided to say the same. And so what we've seen this year is the idea, it's the furthering of the idea that I've always had, which is you don't matter to your country. They don't care about you. You are there to serve them. And perhaps they will toss you some crumbs. Now that kind of goes against what some of the European societies preach. But the tax that I believe they will use this new era of frustration about wealthy people and new government power is a citizenship-based income tax. Now, this already exists in the United States, and other countries are starting to nibble around the edges in executing it. In South Africa, in China, with people living in Hong Kong. Even Colombia has said that if you are a Colombian living in Panama, you have to be double taxed. And so, while the U.S. is the only country that has effectively had this, I believe some European countries, or perhaps even the European Union as a bloc, will implement this in the future. Now, what would this mean? It would mean that unlike right now, where you can simply decide, I don't wish to live in my country anymore. I'm going to deregister. I'm going to go through a non-resident process. I'm going to establish residence somewhere else in a more tax-friendly place, and I'm going to move, and I'm going to set up that lifestyle. Perhaps I'll be somewhat nomadic, but not super nomadic in many cases. That won't work. I'm going to, leave Germany, leave the UK, leave wherever, and I'm going to go and pay less tax. And so that's allowed right now because, hey, you don't live here, why would you pay tax? All the examples of you're driving on the roads, you're sending your kids to the schools. Well, no, I'm not. So, okay, fine, don't pay anymore. Cheerio. The U.S. makes that argument that, oh, well, you're our citizen, you have our passport. We're the best country in the world, after all, right? So you have to keep paying. Yes, there are exclusions, there are reductions, there are credits, there are treaties you can use if you're an American overseas to reduce your tax. Most average American, people who go overseas to just work, they have an $80,000 job, they're not paying much, if anything. They're dealing with the filings. But if you're a successful entrepreneur, if you are a wealthy investor, this kind of citizenship-based tax would affect you. Now, it won't affect you that if you decide to keep living in France, of course you're going to keep paying French taxes. But what if the French taxes get out of hand and you want to move to Belgium, or perhaps even better, let's move to Dubai, let's move to Malaysia, let's move to Panama, let's move to anywhere else where you can pay less. But what if the French government said the following? We believe in a minimum tax. And if you want to move to Germany, they're our brother in the EU. They charge a tax rate that meets our European values, and we'll be okay with that. But if you move to Dubai, doesn't meet our values. We believe there should be a minimum standard. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 12%. Doesn't matter what the number is. Once the cat's out of the bag, the number always increases and the base always widens, right? You're going to pay us. I don't necessarily know that other countries could get away with having a full pay and do everything and file every form no matter where you live. But I think there could be a test of, hey, file this one-page form. Did you pay at least 12.5% somewhere else? Yeah, I did. Great, have a nice life. You're sufficiently French. If you didn't, how much did you pay? And then send us the rest. And so if you're some of the people that I work with where you make a couple $1 million a year, that could be a difference of several $100,000 a year. Over a decade, it could be, $2, $3, $4 million invested. We're talking about changing your family tree. We're talking about a big addition to generational wealth. And yet, this is something that I think could happen to some of these countries because I think they have the political capital these days more than ever to do it. And with the implementation of the Common Reporting Standard, the CRS, they now have some of the measures that the U.S. has to actually enforce something like this, internationally, where they can track down, what bank accounts do you have? They can track down where you are, because when you deregister, they can say, well, okay, tell us where you're going to go, and then we'll know what kind of taxes you're getting into, and we can have a deal with that country to tell us what you're paying, and then we'll figure out what you might owe. And so this is the low-hanging fruit for countries. People who leave the country, now where I'm from in the U.S., you're like really a traitor if you leave the country. Like just going and living somewhere else. I think there are really people who think that you are a bad person. Who cares, right? But maybe some European countries, I think most of them, are more open that people move. We live in a world that has many different countries, right? You can go to different places. And so you have that going for you, which is why I think there will be some saving grace. But this is something that I would prepare for. And I would prepare for it by having more than one citizenship. The good news is some of the European countries, like Norway, that have restricted dual citizenship in the past are now opening up. And so it is now possible for most Europeans to have more than one citizenship. And what I always tell people is have more than one, hopefully in a way that's diversified, what I call a passport portfolio. Now, if you are Italian, and you can get a French passport because you're married to a French citizen and you don't have to do much for that, I'll take it. We made a YouTube video once where I talked about, should I take this free second passport? Listen, I have friends in the United States who are entitled, and we have people that we work with who are entitled to Italian passports, French passports, British passports, all kinds of European passports. If you can get it relatively free, I would take it. In fact, I'm not saying that you should not get a European Union passport. I'm just saying you should have other options. I have been for a long time evaluating my thoughts on this and determining, how I should, bake this into my European strategy. I'm not someone who wants to live in Western Europe, but the idea of having some connection to Europe wouldn't be the worst thing as part of a portfolio. The difference in my case is, if I ever had to not be European, I have other options. Tax-friendly options, options with good mobility, options of countries I would like to live in. And so I don't want you to go out and get a second passport in another European country that doesn't really reduce your risk. Now, if you're French, I think France, maybe Germany, some countries like that, maybe Greece, would be the first ones to try and do this on their own and try and dial into CRS or the EU's network or whatever to get the data. I'm not so certain on a block-wide initiative. I think that would be very difficult. But I think it's possible because I see the writing on the wall with what people are talking about in the EU Parliament. I see all the different policy papers from all the high-tax lobbying groups that are very well favored in political circles in Europe. And so I think that there could be some momentum for that. Certainly, I think that countries like Portugal, Ireland, perhaps some of the Baltics would be against this, and perhaps it wouldn't get off the ground. But some European countries, the countries where you have a lot more wealthy people, I think potentially could put some initiatives together and at least bully their way into getting the data from Europe to implement their own policies and track people down and enforce some kind of minimum tax. And so if you're French and you can become a German citizen, that doesn't really solve your problem. I'd rather you be French and St. Lucian, French and Armenian, French and Colombian, French and whatever else, right? And so this is one of those situations. I had a gentleman I was working with a number of years ago, and he said, should I keep my U.S. passport? He had 3 other passports, and I said, listen, if you're willing to pay X amount of compliance costs every year, fine, you'll be fine. But I said, there's probably a 10 or 15% chance that they'll do this, this, or this. And when that happens, then it'll be a problem, and you'll have wished that you didn't have it. And he said, okay, I'll take the 10 or 15% chance. I'm willing to pay the couple grand every year, no problem. Took less than a year for some of the things I mentioned to come to fruition. And he was scrambling to get out. And I don't want anyone else to be in that situation. I do think that the possibility, percentage-wise, it's not 100%. It's not happening tomorrow. It's not happening next year. Will you have some advanced warning? Perhaps. You might have a couple months. You might have a year. You're not going to get most passports in a year. There are Caribbean citizenship by investment programs that you can go through, and you can get them in potentially 6 months. We are generally, handling those for people, and we're getting people to apply very quickly when they come to us because of the processes that we've created. Yet I hear a lot of people who work with other people, and it takes them a year and a half to get their passport because it took so long to go through the application process, and there were so many hiccups. And so, potentially with the wrong person, you might not be able to respond quickly enough, even with the fastest citizenship that's available. And so my suggestion would be, if you're wealthy and you're European, look at this as something that might happen in the next decade. I think that the chance potentially is 1 in 3, maybe even better. I think some countries will try and do something on this, whether it's yours or not. I would look at this as an insurance policy. I would look at this as, I'm going to go out and maybe I'll get a residence permit somewhere. Maybe it'll be a residence permit where I don't need to live in that country for very long, but then I can work towards citizenship later without actually having to be there, by making a real estate investment, putting some money in the bank, whatever. Maybe it's a country I am willing to go and spend a little bit of time every year and split my time between Europe. I may not save any taxes because I'm not going to be there long enough, but maybe I can go and live in that country. It's a place that I like. Maybe I can invest in a citizenship in a place like the Caribbean. So, if you're looking at this and you're not European and you're looking to be European, I'm all for you going out and doing the Portugal Golden Visa. I'm all for you going out and doing Malta citizenship by investment. I think those are 2 countries that I think won't be the end of the world unless the absolute worst case scenario happens. Latvia, I don't know that it's going to be really the end of the world. Greece, I think, could be an issue potentially, the more I look at it. So I'm not saying don't get those. I'm saying don't make that your only passport. Don't be an American who gets a Portuguese citizenship as a way to leave the U.S. and then be stuck only being Portuguese. Have a portfolio. But if you already are European, I would look at this as an insurance policy that you can have. Get a second residence that leads to second citizenship, or get a citizenship now. Call it a cost of doing business. Figure out what percentage of your net worth or what percentage of your income you can assign. 50 basis points of your net worth to have a citizenship that covers yourself in case something happens. There could be other things that could happen, by the way. There could be other kinds of chaos. Who knows with what we've seen in 2020. But that's something that I would be doing as a call option against higher taxes in a European Union and Europe that is increasingly against wealthy people. And I believe they see the low-hanging fruit, particularly in the highest tax countries that simply don't need to be competitive. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.